Thanksgiving. Setting up your webinar for you. Oh, and here we go. Welcome everybody to Less Tricks, More Clicks. Use smart design to turn website visitors into customers. I'm Dave Meyer, and I'm also joined by the indomitable Trygve Olson and the quite handsome Trygve Olson because he
Party
teamed
on,
up
Wayne.
for that. And we are so excited to talk to you today. I think the age of April Fools is kind of gone because there's enough fooling and tomfoolery in our everyday lives now
Did you
that
do any April
I didn't
Fool's
do any.
pranks yesterday?
I didn't do a single one. I was actually going to do something for April Fools with my parents, and I was going to put some potato chips on their windshield and said they've got a chip in their windshield. But it
That's a
was
good one.
snowing like crazy. And so it would have just been very soggy chips. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. So if any of you did see any of our attendees did see a good prank or page, Google didn't even have a April Fool's page this year. So I think maybe the time of April Fool's is done, and Mother Nature took care of us just fine that way anyway, as we got a whole bunch of really yucky precipitation yesterday in Minnesota. So let's get started and talk about first what the problem is with websites and the fact that we're really battling more than ever how to capture people's attention and to really engage people. And you have 5 seconds, not 0.05 seconds. You have 5 seconds really to give you a first impression. Google actually says within the first 3 seconds, if they don't see what they want, they're moving on. But if you have a bad design, if your website is slow, if you're not converting, or if your website is confusing or doesn't match what people expected when they clicked, you're just going to lose the opportunity to engage with them. So we're going to talk through a whole bunch of stuff today that you can do to hopefully improve your conversions and to turn clicks into customers. And you might be wondering who the heck we are. A lot of the folks that are attendees here today are long-term fans, and we're so excited to have you back with us. But I'm Dave, and that's Trigby.
Hey, hey.
Hey, and we represent BusyWeb. We're based out of Minneapolis. We've been doing this for 26 years now. We have a team of 23 at the moment that are ready and willing to help you with any of these things. We've been talking, and internally at BusyWeb right now, we're doing some strategic meetings, and we talked through all the things that we accomplished in this past quarter for our clients. And it's really fun to see the real results that we're able to convert and to connect. And so, yeah, it's funner than ever, but it's also more kind of insane than ever because things change so often. The entire world of SEO completely changed in the
That's
past
for
couple
sure.
of years. And so we are very much learning right along with everybody else on how all this stuff works. But we're taking all that to you. If you want to talk to us about any of this stuff after today's event, feel free to get a hold of us. You can get both Trigby and I at hello@busyweb.com or at our main line, 612-4-BUSY-O or 424-9990. All right, that's enough about us. Let's get down to business. Um, User experience is one of those things that people don't pay enough attention to. There's a lot of tools, and a lot of us know what we like in websites, and especially as we're designing sites for our clients, we'll put together like the first couple of rounds of design, and we'll get feedback like, "That's great, but it's not exactly what I'm thinking."
The logo
And
isn't big enough, Dave.
yeah, we need the logo bigger. I want more white space or less white space.
I
And
want it to be more like Apple's website.
everybody's different. And so as you look at that, we all have different preferences. And the key here is that we really need to start looking at the numbers and what you get out of your website and the performance. So setting a benchmark and seeing what you do. And, are people visiting the website and then leaving? That's called a bounce. Are they not getting to where you expect them to get? or any of those things, all of that impacts your experience. So, if people see a website, most of them, 90% say that they just won't return to that website again. They're just not going to come back on mobile if they see that, or they're just going to leave. And again, over half of people, if they have to wait more than 5 seconds on a website, they're just gone. And so you really need to pay attention to how well your website engages from the very first moment. There are some fundamentals that just never change. So if you build for your customer and what they need, and note that I said your customer, not for you. This is another conversation that we have with our clients a lot. We all have different kinds of things that we like. And I had a client at one point that said, I just want everything on one page so that nobody ever needs to, click anywhere so that you can just get it all there. But they had a very labor and word heavy website. So if you build your website such that it's Where's Waldo and you need to use the find function to see what you're going to do, people aren't going to hang out. So it needs to be designed for the people that you're trying to engage.
There's some
And
classic examples of how people try
oh,
and game the system.
absolutely.
Have you ever seen a website? We live in a state that is it has, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of little towns, and so typically what you'd see on a website is somebody who lists every town that they work in.
Oh
And
yeah.
in Minnesota, the classic example is they list from Afton to Zimmerman. Well, the weird thing is, in Minnesota, Afton to Zimmerman is only about 45 minutes apart, so it's really not that much of a stretch. However, what it's really trying to do is link stuff and get every word of every city in the entire state in there. Or the other thing that you see is you see a big giant white space, and you're like, well, that's weird. I wonder if something didn't load. No, everything loaded just fine. If you highlight that white space, more than likely there's all sorts of keywords there that are just sitting in there that are the font color is the same as the background, so the naked eye doesn't see it, but the search engines do.
Right.
The problem with that is that that the naked eye looks at that and goes, "Well, that's weird. That's obviously broken. I'm going to go to the next guy."
Exactly. So make it simple, get your content down, think about what your actual customers are looking for, and it's going to be hard to go wrong, especially if you're testing and willing to pivot a little bit. One of the things that you also need to really pay attention to is the navigation on a website. Now, I think this is interesting because I actually had AI help me with a bunch of these images. And while I understand that it was set up for a vertical space, almost no websites have vertical navigation anymore. So,
Hmm.
as you look, if you need to have a clear UX or user experience where the structure is exactly what people expect. If you're a landscape company, you need to have the products and the kinds of projects that you do on your navigation. People need to be able to find it. Everybody always needs to know and understand who you are. And so the About Us page is almost as important as the home page. And your homepage itself should really be almost like a concierge to get people to where they want to go. Again, you shouldn't put every bit of text on your entire website on your homepage, but people should understand everything that you do and be within maximum 3 clicks to get to any place on your website that they're trying to reach.
Yeah, and the trick here is you can get creative with your nomenclature and how you describe this and the taxonomy of the words you used. But at the end of the day, you want people to find things easily. So if they don't understand really what you're trying to get to, then or what you're trying to put out there, being creative isn't necessarily helpful when it comes
Right,
to this. Make it plain, make it honest, make it universal. So a good example um, that we use is have your mom look at it and say and ask your mom to find something. And if your mom can't find it, then you need to change some of the words you use.
right. Absolutely. So make sure that it just makes sense. If you're looking for a interesting like web design geek pastime to check out, Google the worst user navigation awards. There was a online project that everybody got together to see what the worst user interface was. And so it's all the way from, you know, how to turn up the volume on a video player, and you had to like drag blocks across the screen in order to improve the volume, all the way down to just ridiculous things like you had to, shoot a bow and arrow at the screen in order to get to the homepage. So, that's extreme case, of course, but we absolutely want to know and build that out. So, Karina says that she's not getting any audio. So, just quick question, is everybody else able to hear us? I
I can
just
hear
want
you,
to
Dave.
do a check. Thank you, Treefy.
Can you
Um,
hear me, Dave?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
So,
So
Karina, I'm
it's
sorry
not
you're having that
us.
issue. Um, yes. So
Just put in the
if
chat pane if you
everybody
can
else
hear
can hear,
us.
yes. And let's actually, I'm going to chat to everyone and say, can you all
All
hear? Oh,
good, says Mickey.
Mickey says good. Okay,
Mickey from
good.
Green Bay.
Yeah. So sorry, Karina, that you can't hear us and she can't hear that that we're saying something. Um, I'm gonna put one note quickly into Karina. So Karina, try our YouTube channel.
Oh, Dave, she's got the closed captions on. You know what that means? Let's pull up the opening scene of The Godfather and read it into the record.
Ooh. Okay, perfect. So we've got that. Thank you for that input, Karina, and she can see us in closed captions, so she knows we're there. But that's great. So navigation, make sure that it's on point. Typography, you really need to think about making sure that your website is readable and that you're not burying people in the content of your site and giving them so much that they just give up. It's the tyranny of choice, or um, just running out of options. If you go to a huge grocery store and there's 17 different types of ketchup, you're less likely to buy any ketchup at all than if there's just two types and they're easy and you know that they're both good. So making sure that you've got a clear
What do you mean by the tyranny of change, Dave?
tyranny of
That's an
choice.
interesting phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's um, just if you have too many choices, you're less likely to make any choice at all. And that's a big problem with social media today. It's a huge problem with all kinds of different websites and content. So think about streamlining. You should have maybe one type of fonts for your main headings and content. And then you can do a slightly different related font for the actual copy or the text on your site, but they should look good together, right? You need to think about readability. You need to think about accessibility, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But if you have just a mild amount of contrast between words and letters, that's not readable. And especially for people that have vision issues, that can be very just counterproductive in getting people set up. Likewise, if you have different fonts on different pages of your website where it doesn't even look like it's the same company, that's a big problem. So think about and look at how your website looks. And this is one place that sometimes businesses get into trouble with um, CMSs or content management systems like WordPress, where you can do a different theme or a different design on a page pretty much at will.
Hmm.
You need to just settle down a little bit, go off of a template, and make sure that everything is as clean, clear, and consistent as possible.
Hmm.
Next up, you should think about colors. So, in the psychology of colors, your business probably represents a specific feeling for your end customers. And for a lot of us, especially if you're in B2B, you'll notice that a lot of business websites are either in that kind of blue or maybe yellowish tones. There's a lot of white space inside of there, which is very neutral. If you use red and black, a lot of times that'll come off as very aggressive. And or, if you're something where you're trying to do like passionate of some sort, like if you have a racing company or something like that, or maybe a firearms company, then red and black is probably good because that's excitement and that's pop. But if you're an accountant company that is trying to excite people with urgency and passion, that's probably a little bit of a disconnect. There's a lot of greens in large corporate and certainly in healthcare because that's growth and that's health and that's trust. And blue usually represents security and stability. Our brand and our culture at BusyWeb is pretty warm, I hope, and fun and optimistic. And so that's why we do a lot of yellow inside of our business. Trivia, have you had weird experiences with people wanting to misuse or mislabel colors?
Yeah, I think and you oftentimes see this broken down by gender too, is you see a lot of guys tend to really like the Oakland Raiders color schemes of reds and blacks
Right.
and silvers.
Or their
And
favorite sports team, right?
yeah, or their favorite sports team, yeah, or especially here in Minnesota where we have a lot of purple everywhere, is it can be helpful, but this is even before your web design process. This is really based on your overall brand and what is your brand really telling you. And the color scheme is crucially important. Everybody thinks, oh, well, I should just pick the colors I like. No, you really shouldn't. You need to pick the colors your customers are going to like and build it around there. So I think, yeah, I've seen a lot of varying examples of people saying, well, I don't like that particular shade. Well, I don't care because that's what your customers are going to like.
Right. And or you need to make sure it's like I think that is too there's too much contrast there. Like, well, we're trying to make sure that everybody, no matter how their vision works, can see
Yeah.
it.
And it's important you remember that, and I think I'm probably skipping to the end here, is that a really good website needs to have 15 different iterations. So not only does it have to have, it has to have all browsers, it has to have uh, be mobile responsive so that it not only it has to look good on a desktop, it has to look good on a laptop, it has to look good on a phone, it has to look good on a tablet, it has to look good on Android, it has to look good on iOS. Now, in addition to everything, because of people's site issues, iOS especially will do a nighttime version, so everything will go black and white at night, and so
Yeah.
you have to compensate for that as well.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, one of the things that if you think about a brand that that you have clear expectations about, let's talk about McDonald's as an example. If you go to just about any McDonald's and you want a cheeseburger, you know exactly what you're going to get ahead of time because they have standards, they have practices, you have an appreciation as a customer for what exactly you're going to be buying. So, as you're trying to create that same experience for your customers so they have an understanding of an expectation, what are they going to buy? Making sure that the process is consistent is something that you can control, and the presentation is consistent is something that you can control. And the author John Taffer wrote his book Raising the Bar, which I think is just absolutely shaken me to the core. The idea that any business only really has they have their people, they have their processes, and they have the feelings in which they create by experiencing with the company. Those are the things that you can control. Your product is that how that customer has that feeling, and you have no control over it. You only have control over the first thing that leads to the last thing.
Right.
So I feel like I'm getting off topic, but the answer the to roll back into the top point, Dave, is color choice and color contrast and color working in concert makes a huge difference between being successful and not.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this a little bit already, Trigvi, but you need to think about mobile really first in web design now, because more than half of all people, actually 72%, say that they mostly are visiting websites from mobile devices. And if you think about how you work, or certainly if you're a parent age or a parent of kind of teenage kids, Most kids are dual screening their entire world. So if they're watching TV, they're also on their phones simultaneously. And if you're working in a realm or an area where maybe people aren't in front of computers, like if you work on, or if you're a B2B that serves manufacturing companies where a lot of the decision makers are probably on the shop floor, they're not going to be carrying around a laptop. They've got their phone in their hand. They're going to identify the need that your company fills. They're going to search for it on their phone. And if they don't find it, or worse, if they find you and you have a website that isn't built for mobile devices and they have to pinch and zoom and they can't see anything, they're just not going to bother. They're going to go to someplace else that has taken that time. To compound that, if your website isn't explicitly mobile responsive, you're just not going to show up in Google search for people that are searching on mobile. Google's smart enough that it doesn't want to deliver a compromised experience from anywhere in its websites. So if you're searching on Google and you're on a mobile device, you are not going to see any non-mobile responsive devices. If you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about and how to know if your website is mobile responsive, first just grab your phone and check it and see how it looks. And if it looks weird or dumb, or if it's hard to read, there's your sign. But you can also take your website on your computer and just squish the window as narrow as possible. If everything's cut off on one side of that experience, when you squish it as skinny as possible, your website's not mobile responsive. Also, when you are in that mobile experience, the first version was just making sure that it would reposition itself so that it wasn't too small or got cut off on mobile devices. The second and the new version of optimal mobile responsive design is making sure that your website is touch optimized and also kind of voice optimized because people are searching using Siri now and or other things like Amazon Alexa or they're just interacting with your content in lots of different ways. So making sure that you've got all of the right connections and hooks, that you've got plenty of space around calls to action. And we're going to talk about calls to action in a minute. You need to optimize so that somebody walking down a sidewalk, casually browsing, and thinks of your company in the moment can get what they need inside of that spot without stopping, grabbing a magnifying glass, or certainly being so confused that they wind up running into a road sign. So that's mobile. The other part of mobile, of course, is speed. We talked about this a very small bit at the beginning, but if your website is slow because you're on a bad host, there are a lot of cheap web hosts out there that just put together, as many websites as possible on one server. And if any of those websites that you share the server with is under a lot of load, or if a lot of people are visiting, or if there's a lot of content on that website or on any given website that's slowing everything down, you're just going to be slowing your site down. A 1 second delay is probably a 7% drop. After that 3 seconds, you're getting into the danger zone where you're probably going to be starting to lose a significant amount of traffic. After 5 seconds, it's about 90% of people aren't willing to wait even 5 seconds before they start clicking elsewhere. And if it takes a 10-second time to download or to get access to that website, you're just going to be frustrating people and you're going to see your traffic be almost zero. And I'm not going to make you all wait for 10 seconds of silence while we do this. I do that a lot when I'm presenting for Google on speed load time. It's awful to have to wait. There's ways to get around that. You can do what's called lazy loading on your website so that the images that are beyond the initial first screen don't load until you start scrolling so that you don't have to wait for the entire website to download all at once. It was very um, kind of favorable for a while to have the big, beautiful kind of video on the top of your web page for a while. And people have foregone that largely because speed is the biggest importance part of your website. And if it takes 25 seconds to download that beautiful video, of usually the Minneapolis skyline, if you're anywhere near Minnesota and the Stone Arch Bridge, you're going to miss out on that traffic.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, and you're going to get to these in later slides, is poorly built websites
Hmm.
also are a speed killer. And one of the things that we've seen, especially in the WordPress community, is um, 3 years ago, WordPress went to a drag and drop builder interface, which is great and really helpful, and made it a lot more accessible for the community on the whole. The challenge, though, is everybody who had a drag and drop in builder that they were using ahead of time now is essentially loading two of the same softwares in order to do the presentation. So it's essentially doubling the work, which means that it's slow because you're asking for the first drag and drop builder, then you're asking for the second, then you're asking for the content,
Right.
all of which happens in milliseconds, but it happens very, very slowly. So what I encourage people to think of when they think about their website, Dave, is that your website is a restaurant. There are front of the house activities, which is the content, the presentation of things, the feeling that it's meant to evoke, the action that you're asking people to take. Then once you've asked somebody to take that action and they're willing to move forward with you, then that moves to the back of the house and to the kitchen. If you've ever been in a commercial kitchen, it is built for brutal utility, and seconds matter. And if you've ever seen a short line cook work, it is amazing how they're moving and how there's efficiency of movement. It is truly a spectacular sight. Um, that's what the back end of a website really needs to be, because the more code you have, the more things you're trying to ask it to load, which means that it's ruining the experience the more and more you get deeper into it.
Yeah, we have conversations with our clients about this stuff all the time. They want a big sassy video on the front, or they've built their website in WordPress and there's a backend builder like Beaver Builder or Elementor or any of the other over the top things. All that does is dumps a crap ton of code onto your website that your clients need to download in order to see the website. So every site that we build at BusyWeb is an absolute speed demon, respective of certainly where their website used to be, but within the limitations of HTML. So you really need to be as fast as possible. That all leads to friction, really. And what we're trying to do is get rid of the speed bumps that people experience as they're trying to connect with you and identify if you're the solution to their issues. So, understanding people's pain points, speed is an obvious one. If they're red-green colorblind and you have red and green on your website, that's just two gray boxes that they're able to see. And so they're not going to see that and they're not going to be able to react to it. Forms might be super detailed. A open question on a form feels like five multiple choice questions. So if you have data and you're trying to actually get information from people, like even on today's registration, when you registered for today's event, we asked you your name, your email address, and we asked you if you had a question about today's event. It's something that you wanted to talk about with regard to web design. So if we would have asked all kinds of things like, how are you feeling today or any of that stuff, you wouldn't have filled it out and you wouldn't have registered because it's too much. So simplifying all of the content, again, reducing the amount of options, making it clear, especially on landing pages where you may be getting traffic from a advertising or an advertisement on Google and you're promising something. If they click on that because they want whatever you're promising, they get to the resulting page and they have to hunt around to find that promise or what you promised, they're going to leave and they're going to be frustrated and they're not going to come back.
I
And a
think
big, yeah, go ahead.
one of my favorite things with respect to this, because I get access to all of BusyWeb's inbound marketing traffic, and a lot of times what we see, Dave, is we see people who put in a fake name that oftentimes is inappropriate for the workplace setting, or certainly on YouTube, because you should never have anything bad on YouTube. So they put in a fake obscene name, but then they put their real email address so they can get the actual thing. And they're like, "Oh, what? I
Right.
don't understand. How did you get my email?" Well, you gave it to me. You just said your last name was just something. So at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to form management. The problem here is I want everything from that client, though. I want that prospect to tell me what is their issue, what are they interested in, why are they contacting me, where did they find me, who referred them. You're saying I can't ask that on the first form?
Yep. You need
Yeah,
to baby step it. And whatever you promise, you should think about the value of that promise in regard to how much data you're asking for. If you're giving away a car, you can ask a few more questions. If you're asking people to subscribe for your newsletter, you better just list or ask for the email address and that's it.
yeah.
So, make sure that you're careful with that.
To me, it's like dating, because you've been married for a long time.
Mhm.
You know, you get the girl hypothetically, or you get the relationship by listening and asking questions at the right time. Asking 10 questions up front just freaks people out.
Yep. It's too much and it's too intrusive. So, just think about all that. We talked about this briefly, but I wanted to highlight this a little bit more. Calls to action are really the workhorses of website design. So, buttons and things that people click is what you're trying to get people to do when they visit your website. So, a lot of times, especially as we're working with companies that maybe have had a website that they've been using for a long time and or they haven't been focusing on design that much, they'll insist on having all kinds of information about them and text up at the top. So they try to kind of bury people with content. What you need to do is really expect and respect the way that people are interacting with our websites now. They're mostly on mobile devices, as we talked about. They mostly want to get whatever you promised them or whatever they were looking for as quickly as possible, and they want you to tell them what to do next. That's where the call to action comes in. I don't actually like this image that much because it's kind of a dumb call to action, but contact us is one of the most common calls to action on any given website. But if you, for example, and let's use a BusyWeb example, um, people wanted to register for a webinar, and we're going to talk about what other webinars we've got coming up in the future here in a minute. But if they wanted to register, I could just have a button that says register, or I could have something that actually gets to the promise. So, sell more tomorrow, sell more today, or whatever, right? Or just getting the right information as quickly as possible to the right people and making sure that it's not a generic button is very, very helpful in getting people to do what you want them to do.
I think the most important thing you have on screen there, Dave, is again the use of contrasting colors and action-oriented text, because this is really where the rubber meets the road. And you talked earlier about the 5 second mark, and at the 5 second mark, you're asking somebody to who has a problem to evaluate, is this a potential solution for the problem, and am I willing to take the next steps, and am I willing to do something about it, which is ostensibly click a button. So making sure that that button is clear, making sure that it's available, making sure that it's not blending into the background here. So you've got this beautiful yellow hallway and this sort of garish green teal contrast against it. But no matter what, your eye is drawn to it because you can see the difference in the colors. So this is a really good example of what smart design gets you, is it gets people looking to where you want them to look.
Right. So that's kind of mechanics. I want to get into a little bit of psychology of how to get people to do what you want them to do on the web. A lot of times, especially with marketing agencies or things, they'll just say, well, our goal is to get you more traffic. Well, if a bot in some third world country visits your website and you get 10 million visits to the website, congratulations, you've gotten more traffic. Is it going to help you at all to grow your business? No. So you need to make sure that what you're doing is building connections and proving to your visitors that you are the solution for what they do. So you need to think about things like trust signals. Trust signals means that what you're telling them on the site is we can help you, and here's how we can prove that we can help you. That might be case studies. That might be examples where you talk about exactly how you solve the problem that you're talking about on that page. It might be customer reviews or any of a bunch of things. So all of that proof, that's what a lot of social media should be when you're engaging, is you're asking people to connect. I just had a fantastic meeting with a client of ours, and he said, you really changed my life. And this says, and I'm not saying that web design or marketing even can change people's lives, but we did help him pivot his business into a much more profitable and much easier space. And so I asked him, hey, would you mind just giving us a quick review? And so he went to Google and gladly gave us a 5-star review with very specific detail on how we helped. And that's the kind of stuff that you need to prove out to get people excited about working with you. People do research now, even though we have very short attention spans and we're only clicking a little bit. The next thing they're going to do is to search for you on Google, look at
I
your
have a
reviews.
I have a huge hack that I can give people for this.
Oh,
So
I love it. Let's do
this
it.
was this is something that I learned from one of our e-commerce customers that they heard. So this isn't mine by any means, but I since I've heard this, this has truly changed my life. Is any 5-star review is more than likely somebody who's just over the moon happy or related to the person that you're selling. You know, like in the example you just gave, Dave, you asked that person, can you go do that review? They didn't choose upon themselves to do it, so they're doing it as a favor to you, which is great and helpful and good at the same respect. In the same respect, it's not unprompted to do that. Similarly, the 1-star reviews, those people are just cuckoo bananas across the board. And everybody looks at the 1-star reviews because the 1-star reviews are fun and interesting uh and oftentimes Schadenfreude of what are you it's more about the crazy than it is about the tangible point. The
Right.
real important lessons to be learned and the evaluative process that if you're thinking about buying a product or looking at a company is the 3-star reviews. Because the 4-star reviews, those people are Minnesotan by the whole, and those are just people who are never going to give a 5-star review. So okay, fine. The 3-star reviews, they want to ding you, but they don't want to be mean about it. So that's where the legitimacy really comes in from customer product reviews is what are the people in the 3-star reviews really saying?
Right. Right. So, and that's especially true in e-commerce and in
Yes.
the world. And that actually came out of one of our recent podcasts, I think is where we learned that when we were talking about the Amazon experience, which is coming
Wait, we
out
have a
next week.
we have a podcast?
Coming soon to you wherever podcasts are downloaded. Go to dial it in, podcast.com. Yes, sorry. Little ad there, but we love our little pod. You need to personalize your website and give people the opportunity. One of the things that I love about HubSpot websites is you can personalize content to the individual visitor. It's a little creepy, so you have to be careful with this. Like if you went to a website and it said, "Hey Trigvi, thanks for coming back," or "We are the number one place for all Trigvi related persons to work." But you can make it so that if you have 2 or 3 different kinds of ideal customers, if you know that that person is who they are and what kind of information they're interested in, you can customize your website so that it gives them what they're looking for quicker,
Yes.
which is much, much better and more engaging for that person. So if I am a manufacturer and I go to a website and I say, we are the number one place for manufacturers, It's like, oh, well, good, I'm here. Conversely, if it's the same company and it's a accounting company and it says number one place for manufacturers, I'm not interested. But if you say we help accounting companies build their businesses, that's much more engaging. Um, we're getting on to time here already, and I want to have some
Are
time
you
for
kidding?
Q&A.
Wow,
So
this
I'm
has
going to
flown
speed up
by.
a little bit. This is so much fun. This is what we nerd out about. And I want to make sure that we also have plenty of time for your questions. So folks, even if you have submitted questions via the registration, if you have questions now, go ahead and go into the chat and just post them, and we'll make sure to get to them before the end of today. I'm going to speed up just a couple of slides, Trigvi. Um, Accessibility, we talked about this a little bit, so I want to make sure that everybody understands, if you make sure that you've got good, easy, clear calls to action on your website, that makes it super easy for people to navigate via their keyboard because there's links in screen readers. It's actually interesting. You should check out a screen reader YouTube video. It's like go into YouTube and just say, screen reader navigation website design. And it'll show you examples of what people that have limited sight or are maybe even just experiencing because they don't have vision, how they interact and get content read to them and how that works. It's wild. Um, Color contrast, making sure that you've got good text resizing. It's actually a really nice option to build out for day-night mode because most computers now have the ability to change the text colors or the entire OS color based on the time of day it is. And so if you're looking at night and maybe you just remembered something that you're trying to look up right before bed or whatever, um, if you have a bright white website that's going to blind you, that's jarring. And so if you allow for day-night mode, you just have to build that into the design of the website. Um, talked about a couple of things already inside of these trends, but there's a lot that's happening in user experience right now. We are building a lot more for voice interface, and so thinking about how you can navigate not only your website, but make sure that you've got content that is digestible by things like AI chatbots, because one of the biggest ways that people actually interact with ChatGPT is literally talking to it. And so if you have content that is digestible by those bots that can rebuild or connect and give them the information, the data they're looking for, that's super helpful. Predictive UX, that's kind of in the customization that we were just talking about. But based on the user intent that you think they have when they're coming to you, are they looking for information? Are they actually wanting to buy? Are they just kind of kicking tires? Making sure that your experience helps guide that model dependent on who they are. And then even augmented reality. There are toys out there, largely still toys, but even with your phone, you can hold up a phone and QR codes are one of the easiest and most proliferant um, augmented reality bits. But if you know that people are interacting with you, or if you're at a conference, having a QR code that brings them to the information that they're looking for very quickly, or maybe lets them see your furniture in their room is all super helpful and can help you close those deals. Trivia, I want you to talk about consent and privacy for a minute because I think this is super interesting for everybody to understand.
So much is going on in the in the consent world right now that it is really interesting. I think what everybody, especially as you get older, sort of has this idea and this concept that the websites are out to get me and they're going to steal my personal data. And so, as a result of that, the European Union came up with a set of privacy laws called GDPR. And don't ask me what GDPR stands for because it stands for something important, and you should look it up. But what it means is, in order to make your website more user friendly and more intimate for you, then you have to have a certain amount of requirements. Usually that starts with cookies. Cookies are a simple tracking feature. It's kind of like a bookmark for a website. Where did you leave off? Because a lot of times when you visit a website and then you leave, but then you come back to the same page you were on. That's a tracking cookie that's sitting on your computer. Or if a website loads particularly fast, that's because a lot of that data is already sitting on your computer and it's really only executing a command to say, go get that stuff from earlier. So what that's manifested itself differently now is you see this, especially in iOS, where tracking across apps is now available to developers, or it's preventable on the user front. And again, the question then becomes then as a user, then what do you do about it? And so as you're building out a smart website, make your privacy policy clear, make it open, make the language clear so you're not using all sorts of jargon. Everybody can clearly understand what exactly you're going to do with my data and how exactly you're going to make my life better. If that's it, you're not going to sell my data, you're not going to do anything nefarious with it. Great, sure, I'll say yes to cookies. But if not, then I'm going to be a little bit more cautious about what I'm going to give you.
Right. And you need to just understand that a lot of people are just not going to give that consent no matter what you try. So
Yep.
you have to be very clear on what you're asking and understand that they may be coming back to your website the next time with absolutely no change in their interface because they've chosen not to let you track them or to connect with them. So you always have to get them, again, within the first 3 clicks to wherever they want to go. All right, so there's a lot in here, and actually, I think I tried to over deliver. So for anyone that wants this entire deck, I am happy to share this with you. Just send us an email. You're going to get a follow-up email if you registered for today's event, telling you, here's the date detail. Just reply to that, and we'll give you this entire deck. Because I think there's some important stuff in here, but we are getting very close to time, and I want to answer those questions. Um, think about the emotion of your design. And we talked about coloring, but also think about micro interactions. So giving people little itty bitty bits to win as you're connecting. That's what calls to action often are, or splitting your content into bullets so that they don't have to read a large block of text, but also thinking about not being so blatant in your self-servance that you're not engaging people. So telling the story of how you help your customer and helping them along that journey can be incredibly important. You need to think about analytics as you're going through this. So making sure that you're using Google Analytics for sure. If you're in HubSpot and your website's there, there's a bunch of fantastic reports and things that you can use. And there's actually AI where you can just literally say, what was my most profitable lead generation strategy this month? Um, things like bounce rate, which is how often people leave without doing anything else on your website.
Hey, Dave.
How long? Yeah.
Dave. 1985 called. They want their Google Analytics page back.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah.
And notice again, AI, apoplectics. What the heck is that? But it's very fun and it's funny. But thinking about your conversion rate, your exit pages, and where people are leaving your website, that all tells you how people are interacting with your site, and that gives you data on how to improve. When you're thinking about content, make it scannable, bullet points that you have clear value on every page and a good narrative, and that you're building towards some sort of action, and that action is your call to action. And you need to have performance metrics that really do matter on your website. So that's, your conversion rate, how much revenue you're generating, what the task completion rate is. So you want people to sign up for a webinar, for example. How often on a click do people actually fill out that form? And then, of course, user satisfaction, using tools to say, hey, how was this experience? If you visit anything on HubSpot, for example, once in a while, you'll get a little thumbs up or a smiley face, sad face icon, and just tell us how we're doing. That kind of content can really help, and it can help you tap into where you might be frustrating your customers. There's lots of tools and things that you can tap into for this. Figma, Adobe XD, Sketch, is super helpful for analytics. Of course, Google Analytics is the big one. but we also use Hotjar, SEMrush, and then straight up good old-fashioned user testing. As you're building content, we love Content Hub, HubSpot Content Hub, but WordPress and other places are also very good. Just got to go with what works for you, and that's the best balance of usability and optimization. And then there are some things that you should really avoid. So, we talked about these kind of high level, but if your website is super cluttered, or if it doesn't have a great mobile design, or if you're not telling people what to do, like right within that first screen, if your call to action is 17 swipes down on a page, nobody's going to make it to the bottom of that page. That's where tools like Hotjar are helpful actually, because it shows what's called heat maps. And so it'll say only 2% of the people on the website got down to this far in the page. So making sure that you're looking for that. And of course, we already talked about navigation and load times. As you're implementing all of these, here's the four-step process to make this happen. You need to audit and take a look at your website, get some reviews from people who are actively working on it. Like Trigvi mentioned, ask your mom to visit your website. And if she can't get it, then maybe you need to think about simplifying. Think about your strategy, then you go into design and testing, and of course, then you implement. We also go back and we continually improve our clients' websites every quarter by going through and looking at results and optimization. To future-proof your site, think about design that outputs clean code and that is modular so that you can add different things. Anyone that's a client of BusyWeb that we've built their website in the past 2 years for sure, you can literally drag additional modules into your site. So if you're like, I really want to have a small testimonial video, you can go into the design page of any given page on your site and add a design module. I want a review page. You can just add that. That's all done by smartening up your content. That's why we love HubSpot's Content Hub, because that's how it's built. To build your design and to go forward, what you need to do is just set a plan. We're happy to chat with you about it if you'd like, or if, feel free to review this. The content is available now on YouTube at youtube.com/busyweb. You can review this. Like we mentioned, just request the slides and we'll send you a link to this deck. There's all kinds of helpful information out there. Just start moving down the path to get you where you want to go, which is where I wanted to be like 5 minutes ago, Trigvi. So let's go
You're
into our Q&A.
you're doing great, Dave.
Thanks, man. Okay, so we did have from, let's see, from Carolyn. Um, how do you use AI in strategic planning for your website? So Trigvi, I know that we're doing that a lot with our clients. How are you doing it right now?
Oh man, so many things that you can do to use AI. You can ask AI to tell you who's coming to your website, what do they look like, do they meet your ideal customer profile? You can use AI to build yourself an ideal customer profile, and then compare the two. You can ask whether or not the design meets their needs, or what you need to be doing differently. Um, you can, depending upon the AI interface, you can ask AI to do a good portion of this for you in terms of doing the research. The trick is, and I think the neat thing about what Dave did today is he cleverly left in a couple of little minor things because AI isn't perfect. And yeah, we even called them out and they're cute and funny, but the human element absolutely needs to come into play. But I think depending upon what you want to do, the AI can tell you almost exactly what you want to do, and really to be able to drive business. Because the challenge in all this, Dave, is I think if you talk to 10 different web designers and ask them to evaluate a website, they're going to tell you 10 different things that are wrong with the website.
Right,
So at the end of the day, the important thing is not what you want, it's what your customers want, and are you delivering it?
right. Agreed. Danielle asked, what's the ideal number of call to action buttons on a page and what works better, switching them out and using different variations or using the same ones? In general, what you want to have is one call to action on the first screen above the first fold of your website, and then probably no more than two more after that. I'm not including navigation in that because you want to be able to get people wherever they want to go within 3 clicks, but less is more. And I wouldn't switch out calls to action because what you're trying to do is make your website repeatable and understandable. And if you keep switching what you do, it's almost impossible to know what's working and what's not. And then do certain colors perform better? Just making sure that you have good contrast is the most important part. But a lot of research says that red can be a very good call to action. I like yellow, or if you have a yellow website, to have something in the bluish realm can be really interesting and pop. But it does need to go it needs to have plenty of contrast so that it pops to the eye. Um, Frank asks, is using a company like GoDaddy to host your website a good idea? It can be, but you want to be careful so that your website isn't too dragged down
Oh,
by other people.
I have answers for this.
Yeah. So, it's important to think about that. That's one of the reasons we like HubSpot because they spend a ton of time and effort into making the website as fast as possible. I don't like GoDaddy because it constantly upsells. But other than that, it can also just kind of get slow.
Here's my here. The answer is yes and no at the same time,
Mhm.
Frank. The can you host on GoDaddy? The answer is yes. It's basic. GoDaddy is the hosting equivalent of renting an apartment. You are
Right.
living with 100 people on the same server, and you have no idea who the other people are. You have no idea what they're doing, whether that they cook funky foods that is going to affect your website, anything like that. It also means that GoDaddy only assigns a certain amount of resources to that server. And so if you suddenly have a spike in traffic or somebody else has a spike in traffic, that's going to affect your website. So there are pluses and minuses. And I think, as Dave said, the challenge that I have with GoDaddy is they always want to sell you more stuff, and you don't necessarily need more stuff.
Right. Exactly. So just, get to what you need to. It's fine as a tool, but there are definitely other options out there that you should consider. Finally, I did want to, since we're at time, give you a call to action to please sign up for our next event. So we've got Don't Set Your Marketing to Out of Office. Keep marketing strong during the summer slump. That's coming up on May 7th. And just go to
May already?
visitup.com
Good
slash
gravy.
events. Yeah. And here's Danielle's answer. Our call to action button is red on that one. And actually, let me escape on this because I don't think that that's showing up right. And I want to make sure everybody can see it. Here we go. So that's our May 7 event. Thank you all very much for hanging out. We do have a couple more questions, so I wanted to get to those top things. But for folks that were hanging out, hoping to get an answer to their question, um, happy to answer those now. So um, let's see. Bev asked, what are some effective strategies for nonprofit org websites? And I think, all the same things really apply, but what you want to get to is really the why behind and the feel good for the most part on nonprofit websites. So you want to be a little less transactional and a little bit more relational for nonprofits because you're trying to tug at their heartstrings and to connect with them as humans. Not that you shouldn't do that with other businesses, but you can lean more into that for a nonprofit and it should relate to your cause.
A really good nonprofit says thank you over and over and over and over and over again on their
Yeah,
website. And that's their call to action is thanking the people who've already donated because that creates a sense of FOMO if you haven't donated.
right. So, and finally, we had Mickey actually asked, do users really give out all that information or do they just hit the X and go to another website? That's why you want to ask a small amount of questions and then build a relationship over time. If you ask too much, you are just going to get X'd out and nobody's going to come back. So, gosh, this was super incredibly fun. lots of data, probably a little bit more than we should have delivered. But we nerd out on this stuff, so it's always super fun to do that. Thank you for the time and attention, and thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to see you on May 7th. Go to busyweb.com/events to register for Don't Set Your Marketing to Out of Office. Keep marketing strong during the summer slump. Talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
See you
Thanks all.
next time, Dave.
Thanks, Trigvi.